Well, good Sunday evening. And this is Bob Graves, and they call me the unconventional pastor. It's good to be back with you again. I do want to mention before we forget to mention it that our wonderful friend William Torres was unable to have his show today. I understand that his wife is in the hospital, and he has been very busy with that, and so we want to keep uh, his wife and William in our thoughts and prayers as they go this. As far as I know, it is not just a splinter, but it's not at this point in time something horribly serious, just something that really needs some attention. And of course, to go through any kind of medical need that requires hospitalization is always a very trying and demanding time for any couple, any family. So we'll want to keep them in mind. Uh, Now, well, on to the topic. Um, as a person who does this show, I every time I come on, I'm trying to come up with something that I think will be useful, that I think will be meaningful. And I must confess that in many times I don't really have that personal an agenda. It's not like, oh, now that I have this show, I want to be able to tell people about this. I want to talk about that. I really don't feel that way. Um, but I am trying to think of things that I think will be meaningful and useful. And sometimes I come up with an idea. Oh, this would be very useful, and I talk about it, and I don't really get much other than, well, it was nice. It was a great show and all that. And I'm thinking, well, I thought that would have been useful. And then there's sometimes when I talk about something and I'm not sure if it would be useful, and then I get all these comments and responses. And the last show that I did was one where I thought it would be okay. Well, I could talk about that. That might be useful. And the last show that I did, I got a number of emails, a number of personal messages on Facebook and other comments and other places, and a great number of people who spoke to me about the last show, where they really wanted me to talk more about some of the things that I had said, and really appreciated some of the things that I was talking about. And that kind of surprised me. I wasn't expecting that. Excuse me. And so that's exactly what we're going to try and do today. We're going to continue talking about that. And what was of particular interest to people was what it was that I had to say about emotions. And they asked me to even clarify some of those things a little bit more. And so that's what I plan to do. And of course, to me, when I first made the comment, it was in some ways just kind of a peripheral remark, because I was mentioning that in my own personal growth as a person, that I felt that my faith had really gotten in the way, that my immature faith, my traditional faith, had really gotten in the way of some of the ways in which I needed to develop as a human being. And I found myself coming to the opinion that I was um, really uninformed and unaware of my the meaning and the place of emotion. Real need to kind of look into that, and eventually we even went back to college to get a degree in human development, where that was my focus. And I enjoyed that, and so I started sharing some of the things there, and people asked me if I would say a little bit more. So that's what I'm going to do. But for a minute here, or for just a second here, I'm going to mute my mic while I give myself a good cough. Have a tickle in my throat, and so there we go. Hopefully that'll help. Um, Basically, what surprised a lot of people, and what they thought was interesting, was the fact that I spoke about how I perceive all emotions as amoral, as involuntary. And the other thing that surprised people was when I talked about how emotions don't have anything to do with reality. They're not in touch with reality. And that also, when I claim that emotions are not actually even a response to any stimulus outside of you. And that surprises people. I think that in our culture in general, not just for people of faith, that there is a real lack of respect for and a dismissiveness and a contempt for our emotions. And I think this creates for us a lot of difficulty in finding both, maturity and healthy development. Leads us towards being neurotic or anxious and all sorts of other things that I think that we end up doing to ourselves because we have an unhealthy attitude, I think, about emotions. So I'm going to explain a little bit more in depth what it is that I understand to be the dynamic of human emotion. And it's also a weird way of that I have to be so countercultural that I found that the best way to do this is to actually say things that are going to cause people to think when they first hear it, no, that's not true. That's not right. For example, if I were to say something such as this, people feel that their emotions are not reliable, that you can't really rely on them, that if you make your decisions based on your emotions, that you're going to be making very bad decisions. I say totally wrong, that you can completely rely on your emotions. And they are probably the most honest thing about you, that you can always 100% depend upon them. The problem isn't whether or not your emotions are reliable, it's what are you relying on them for. For example, suppose I get pulled over by a police officer. Uh, Son, do you know how fast you were going? Well, sure, yes. Officer, got a speedometer right here. Well, what's the speed limit here? Well, my speedometer was saying 85, and so the speed limit here must be what, 85? You know, I start talking to the police officer like this, and I'm looking him straight in the face, and he realizes I'm being serious. He's gonna start wondering, "Uh, what you think that because your speedometer said 85 that makes that the speed limit? Well, in the physical world, you can't exceed the limits. It's just not possible. And I'm doing 85. My speedometer says 85. So 85 must be the limit. I continue talking like that. This guy's going to realize after a while, I don't get it. He's pulled over somebody who doesn't understand what a speedometer is for. If I rely on my speedometer to tell me what the speed limit is, this isn't going to work, because speedometers don't tell us what the speed limit is. They tell you what you are doing with the speed that you're traveling at. They don't tell you what the speed limit is. And in a similar way, emotions do not tell you anything about reality. You can't rely on them for reality because they don't know anything about reality. They never have and they never will. But they do know something about what you are doing with reality, and you can count on them to do that with absolute perfection as the most honest thing about you. And so I think that the reason why we dismiss emotions in our culture oftentimes is because we think of emotions as some sort of alternative to detecting reality, that I can determine what's going on around me both by, well, what I think, what I observe, what I see, what I notice, and also how I feel about it. And I say, wrong. How you feel about what you're going through says absolutely nothing about what you're going through. Nothing. It never has and it never will. And the more you do that, the more you're actually going to be playing a game of denial that isn't good. Secondly, I'm going to be saying this, that um, the more that you try to change how you feel, you're going to discover that this isn't a healthy thing to do. You're either going to make yourself neurotic, or you're going to make yourself shamed, or you're in some way you're going to make yourself unhealthy emotionally, because emotions do not require that they be changed. If there's ever a problem with your emotion, I want to say the problem is elsewhere, kind of like the police officer pulling me over. If my speedometer is saying 85 and my car is actually going 85, there is no problem with my speedometer. There may be a problem in going 85, but the problem is not in my speedometer. The problem is in my liberty at going at a speed that is not allowed by the culture and the laws that are going on, and my failure to appreciate how the speed limit is determined. But the problem is not with my speedometer. Likewise, I'm going to say that all of these emotions that might be inappropriate and out of place, it is never because there's a problem with the emotion, ever. And I think that the way that we talk about it and the way we think about it actually creates for us far more problems than it needs to. And I hope I've said enough that it's got you on the edge of your seat where you're wondering, well, where is he taking this? How's he going to talk about this? Um, how do you know about reality? I hate to sound like, Captain Spock on Star Trek, but the only way you know anything about reality is by observing it and thinking about it with clear critical thinking skills. That is the only way you can know about reality. Now, as you make sense of reality, as you put things into perspective, as you associate things and determine that they have particular meaning or that they make sense in a particular way or that they work in a particular way, you are now making sense of things by putting them together in a coherent story. And as you do that, you're coming to your particular perspective of things based upon, of course, your capacity to observe, your ability to think, and the focus that you have and the things that you're thinking about. Now, your emotions, on the other hand, I am going to argue your emotions are actually always and at every time your internal sensory response to you. It is a response to what you are doing with reality. And I got a comment here, so I want to take a quick look at the comment. I thought I saw some. No, that wasn't a comment. It was just somebody coming online there. You've got Skype here. Basically, what I'm talking about is this: that what are you doing with reality is reflected back to you in summary through this perception of sense, of feeling called emotion. Now, experts in the field of emotion make distinctions between, say, mood and affect and emotion, and they many times want to delineate these things differently, and we'll let them do that. But the average person walking down the street tends to put these things all together in one kind of thing. And although, mood may have to do with a certain inertia that you're in because of biochemistry or a mode of thought that tends to be a little more permanent. Feelings come and go in a far more spontaneous way. Let me try to understand it or help you understand what I'm talking about this way. When I am in, say, a conversation with somebody and I'm finding myself irritated with what it is they're saying, are they irritating me? Am I irritated by their conversation? I'm going to argue absolutely not. That's not what's irritating me. I refuse to believe that there's any validity in that kind of an observation, even though that's the common way it's seen in our culture, even by, unfortunately, even many psychologists. I'm going to argue that no. If I'm in a conversation with someone and I'm feeling irritated during this conversation, as a result of this conversation, what's irritating me is this: the personal opinions that I possess, the value that I have of my own personal opinion, the personal opinions that I think I'm hearing from this other person, and my sense of values over their personal opinion. And then the way I'm dealing with this reality, this is what creates my irritation. They're not irritating me. I'm irritating me. I'm irritating myself by finding myself in this situation where I have these values and it appears to me they have those values and I don't like that. Well, that's my problem. And therefore, it's my experience. But I say that it's my problem, but there's a sense in which this isn't a problem. What if I have values that I truly value, that I think are valuable in having? And I'm talking to somebody who has other values that are contrary to the values that I have, that I find to be either dangerous or or dysfunctional, or even some ways obstructive to the things that I value, and I find myself irritated, well, that's fine. I should be irritated. It's my privilege to be irritated. It is my honor to be irritated, and I'm not irritated with them. I'm irritated with the experience that I'm going through, and it's my experience, and that makes it my problem and my domain. And therefore, if I need to deal with this other person, the fact that I'm irritated is irrelevant to what's going on between them and me. It's entirely relevant to what's going on inside of me, but completely irrelevant to what's going on with me and them. And think about it. This allows me to engage myself in a conversation with someone else where I might actually find myself unhappy with the way that conversation is going, but I can still have a lucid, proper conversation with them because I'm not holding them responsible for how I feel about it. I'm holding me responsible for how I feel about it. If I want these values and I perceive I'm in a world where other people don't share those values, I am sorry, but that's part of the package deal. That is going to create in me certain feelings as a result of the way I'm perceiving reality. That's part of the package deal. That's all there is to it. There's only one thing for me to do with that irritation, only one thing to do with it. Feel it, embrace it, have it. There's nothing else I need to do with it. There's nothing else I can do with it. And there's nothing that needs to be done about it. Well, what if the conversation comes to an end? Well, I suppose that when my focus changes and I start doing other things and other things come up to my mind, I will have other feelings, and that will be wonderful then. But I don't perceive emotions as the sort of thing that need to be managed. Now, certainly my behavior is, but I am going to argue that emotions are a reflection back to me that force me to be honest with myself about what is on my mind. What is my focus? What is my perspective and set of beliefs that I embrace as true, or that I have historically embraced as true about those things that are in my focus? What is my current state of health? Because that will limit the sorts of emotions I'm biologically capable of precipitating within my being. And also, what is my capacity for thought, for thinking? There are some things that are beyond my ability to know. And within the constraints of this, what I'm saying is this: if you could know at any given moment in time exactly what it is I am capable of knowing and thinking, and exactly what my aptitude and capacity for thought is entirely, if you were to know my state of health and the way that that state of health affects my capacity to be in certain moods at the time, if you were to understand completely my history and how it has shaped the way I understand value and make sense of things, and then you were also to understand completely what is actually on my mind and what it is I am focusing on in this moment and what it is that's actually happening that I'm not paying attention to. If you were to know all those things about me and then also know how I feel, you'd go, oh, well, that makes complete sense. Now, let me ask you this: if that were to make complete sense, how can there be anything wrong with how I feel? Now, this doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong with driving 85 miles an hour, because there's nothing wrong with a speedometer, because if I'm driving 85 and it says 85, there's no problem. It's kind of like saying, I don't have a drinking problem. I drink, I fall down, no problem. It's all working as it should. The problem, however, can come in being honest. Is my focus truly balanced? Am I really paying attention to all the features present that are genuinely relevant to the issues at hand? Am I doing that? Is my perspective based only on my own experience? Am I open to the idea that there's a multiplicity of ways of understanding things? Am I open to understanding things in a greater and wider way than I do? Am I open to taking good enough care of myself that I'm in reasonably good health? Am I willing to take responsibility for when I'm not feeling well, to recognize that this will affect my mood? Am I willing to recognize that I can't have feelings about anything about which I am unaware of because it's beyond my capacity to notice? You know, if someone says to me, "Oh, did you, as I'm an audio engineer, did you notice that funny little sound up there around 17 kilohertz?" I can't hear 17 kilohertz anymore at my age. I can't hear it. So if there's something funny going on in the audio at 17 kilohertz, I will never know it. And the only way I can know it is by using spectrum analyzers. In fact, that's what I have to do at my age. But the idea being that, you know, emotions are a reflection back to me that help me to be honest. I can't focus on something without having feelings that focus precipitates. And if I find myself honest about what I'm paying attention to and I see that I'm having certain feelings, then I if I embrace those feelings, I have to be honest about not only what I'm focusing on, but what it is that I think about those things. For example, if I'm particularly happy about something, then being happy about something means that I'm perceiving the situation as really good. You know, what if I'm happy that my enemy has been tortured to death and I'm happy about that? Is there something wrong with being happy about that? I would want to argue, well, there's something wrong here, but what's wrong here is not that I'm happy about it. What's wrong is the way I fail to understand and value the humanity of my enemy. The way that I fail to value these behaviors, that's where something is wrong. And there's a sense in which the fact that I'm happy about it is merely a manifestation of my values and focus actually are. And therefore, being honest about what I feel can help me evaluate what my focus really is and what my values really are in a manner that allows me to reconsider whether or not this is an appropriate focus, if somebody can bring other things to my mind. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. I am arguing that your emotions are never a response to the reality going around you. Um, they're never a response to the reality going on around you. They're always a response to what you're doing with reality. Um, if you're in a conversation with somebody and during that conversation you find yourself um, bothered by something they said and it's starting to get to you, and then as the conversation goes on, you discover that you misunderstood what they said. Oh, and now you're no longer bothered. Now let me ask you this. Are you bothered by what they said? Or are you bothered by what you thought they said? Do you see what I'm saying? Your emotions are a response to your perception, not the reality, but your perception. And not only that, but evidently your focus, you were paying attention to certain words, the way they were saying this and the way they were saying that. And it led you to a point where you perceived it in a particular way. And your emotions are merely helping you to be honest about the way you're perceiving things. That way, if somebody says, "Are you irritated with what I said?" and you start saying things like, "No, no, I don't, no, I'm not bothered by that," and you're lying. You're not being honest with yourself, and it's easy to do if you don't have any emotions. But when you have emotions, it becomes far more difficult to do. Anyway, here we got some viewer comments. I don't think that all emotional reactions are right, but I believe that if there is a problem, that problem is only compounded if I'm not honest with myself about the emotional reaction I'm having. Um, I don't know, whose comment that is, and definitely you have the majority view. But I am going to argue that research does not show any way in which our emotions are ever a response to anything other than our perception, our focus, limited and constrained by our state of health, a- and also by our capacity to be aware of what it is we think is sensory perceived as going on around us and in us. And since all of our emotions can be directly traced to those things, and all that's going on outside in reality is only known about as it's received through our sensory perception, I would want to argue that this is a bit of a premature assumption on the part of people who make it. I understand that we don't stop to think about how this works. But the truth is, our emotions are actually buffered from reality. They have to pass through our perception first. They have before emotions ever happen. They have to be a response to the way we have organized our reality and the way we make sense of it. It is never a response to the reality itself, because the truth is, none of us are in touch with reality. We have a sensory perception that is then perceived and made sense of. Anyway, if we don't agree, then that's fine. If I don't like that, that's my problem. Just kidding. Anyway, Bob, love to see you talk with some passion. Well, thanks. Yeah. Uh, uh, Sometimes it gets in the way, doesn't it? But sometimes it's wonderful. I think it's important, though, that as we realize when it comes to the way that we feel, that we have many times wanted to deal with the denial, the wrong issues. We If we can try to control the way other people feel, sometimes we don't like the way other people feel. We sometimes don't like their attitude. I guarantee you that there's nobody out there who has an attitude problem, except that they have a problem in understanding an appropriate sense of boundaries, an appropriate sense of responsibilities, an appropriate sense of finding a locus of control, and things like that. That these are the problems. And my experience has been that when people with those sorts of problems can be brought to a point where they can see these things differently and embrace them differently, all of those attitude problems disappear without them ever having to work on them, because these attitudes are a reflection of those dynamics going on inside of them in that manner. Um, Now, this has led me, though, in thinking about this, to come to a number of what I would call rules of the road, and some that I've already mentioned. First of all, I do believe that it is appropriate for me to be um, conditionally transparent with how I feel. But when I say conditionally transparent, I mean this, that there are some people who won't understand or appreciate how I feel, won't be able to work with it well. And as a result, I'm not so sure that I should, wear my feelings on my sleeve so as to kind of push them in their face. My emotions and the things that I'm feeling are not an opportunity for me to poke somebody with an elbow in their ribs, as it were. But at the same time, I don't think it's always appropriate for me to be hiding what I feel. I think that it's okay for me to be open and honest about what I feel. But I think that that becomes a very difficult thing to do the moment you begin holding anybody responsible for how you feel except for you. And therefore, if I want to have the focus that I have, if I want to have the perspective that I have, if I am going to be the person I am, then this involves having the feelings that I have, and they are mine. I must own them as my own. And as the result of my own focus, my own conclusions that I draw about the meaning of things, and then that means that, therefore, when I'm in a conversation, although I can be very transparent about my feelings, I don't have to hold anybody ever responsible for them. Let me give you an example of how this works for me in two different ways. First of all, as a college professor, I find that sometimes I'm dealing with a student who's just not doing the work. And I can be honest with you. I don't like that. I don't like it when a student's not doing the work. I'm putting forth all this effort to create lectures and class time experience and lessons and tests and all this, and plus no doubt they're putting a ton of money into this, or their parents are, and then they come along and they're just kind of not really focusing on the work, and I don't like that. Well, guess what? That's not their problem. How I feel about it is not their problem. Now, I don't think I should hide the fact that I don't like it, but I don't want the fact that I don't like it to be something that now they have to do something about it. I think that if they're going to do something about their lackadaisical approach to school, they need to have a reason for doing it that makes sense to them. And I need to find that. And I need to speak to them where, although I can be honest with them about how I don't like it, The fact that I don't like it is, in my opinion, totally irrelevant to whether or not they should do it. They don't need to be a good student to please me. They need to be a good student in order for them to make better decisions for their own life. And if I can't find a way of helping them to see how they can be a better student to their own benefit, then the truth is, I don't deserve to have them as a better student. Who am I that I should live in a world where I don't ever have this irritation of a bad student? It's you see, I see the way that I feel about it as my problem, and I don't really see it as a problem. I see it as an honest reflection of how I evaluate my teaching and how I evaluate that student's approach to their studies, and so I'm honestly bothered by it. I don't like it. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, that's my own experience. Now, when it comes to dealing with a student, that is not going to be the issue. The issue is going to be, what do they need to do? What are they hoping to do? Where do they think this is going to lead them? Do they see this? What's going on? Are they busy? Are they distracted? Are they feeling bad? Do they have test anxiety? When I deal with the issue with the student, I'm more interested in understanding where it is they are coming from and what it is they need to make a difference that makes sense to them to make. And by doing that, I think that helps me as a professor to deal with student problems better. And many times a student will be amazed when they deal with me and then finding that although I may have various feelings that I'm not necessarily hiding, when I'm not holding them responsible for those feelings, it makes it so much easier for me to demand of them that they take responsibility for what they're doing and not doing, because it's their choices. It's what they're doing, and they need to own it and take responsibility for it. Another example of how that works is when I was in a band, they used to let me do most of the negotiating for our fee. And I think I was pretty good at negotiating it. I'd usually come away with a better price than they would sometimes. And part of the reason why I think I was better at negotiating it is because I didn't let how I felt about the negotiation or how the person I was negotiating with felt about it have any impact on the negotiation. Nor did I feel a need to make them hide how they feel or to hide how I feel. Let me give you an example. You go into a bar and you're talking to the owner there and you want to bring your band in and they say, well, I mean, why would he ever want to pay anybody any more than he had to? Well, we take, let's say, let's just give a round figure of, well, we charge $500. Well, I'm not going to pay $500. Well, we're not going to play for less than that. Well, we can't do that. Well, let's then talk about what it is that you can do, and if that's acceptable, and then and we might find, well, that's not acceptable, and he may not like paying more than that, and I might not like getting less than that. But the point is, I'm going to try and negotiate entirely on what people can we bring in here? How much money are you going to make? How much of that are you willing to share with us in order for you to make that money? If you want to make the money, then we'll do it. And if you're not going to make the money, then you really shouldn't hire us or hire us at that price. And if you really shouldn't hire us at that price, we don't need this job and we won't take it. and and all of these feelings that we have about, well, yeah, but we want to really play and we really want that money. Those to me are irrelevant in the negotiation. The negotiation is based entirely upon what's win-win for us, what works for him, what works for us, what can we do, how can we both make money, what's going to be fair, what's going to be appropriate. And if we can come to a decision based on that, that's great. And if he ends up paying more than he'd like to, as long as it works out for him and he's making money, and he does, and he really would have wished to have gotten away with less money, then that's just interesting, but it's not going to change the negotiation. Not that I want to take advantage of them, but I want the negotiation to be based entirely upon the merits and demerits of the arrangement. Period. And how anybody feels about it is just something to be honest about. Period. Anyway, we got more comments here. Uh, I love what you're saying right now, Bob. This is awesome. Well, thank you. Now, it took me a while to come to these conclusions because it was something that I found that was something that, first of all, I do believe that our culture tends to be unaware of and ignorant of, and it certainly doesn't help us. And then for those of us who are perhaps troubled or in various other ways traumatic damaged and have to kind of find our way out of it to deal with the normal rules that tend to exist in our culture, it doesn't work. Let me tell you how culture develops its rules. The people who have the power get to decide what the rules are. If they have the ability to bring punishment upon others for not following those rules. And then we tend to state these rules in ways that make them sound right, make them sound fair, so as to manage the rebellion that could otherwise occur. Most cultures are not really interested in creating rules that are based upon true fairness, true honesty. And I really think that it's by recognizing that all of our emotions are actually a response within ourselves, a response to what we are doing with reality rather than a response to reality. Our sensory perception is our response to reality. Our emotions are a response to what we are doing and who we are doing it with reality, and that's it. Consequently, your emotions are an internal affair and must be treated and owned as that. I say that also, other rules that I've come up with are that I must accept responsibility for my emotions, and it's perfectly okay that I have them. Sometimes I would tell people things like this, have you, do you ever get offended? Sure. Sure, I hear things and see things, and then I find myself being offended. Well, do I like that? Well, it's not a pleasant experience, but it's not a problem either. To me, being offended is a privilege, and it's a privilege in this way. The things that offend me are things that strike me as distasteful, and I have certain things that I find tasteful. I have certain things that I value, that I perceive ought to be treated in a particular way. But these are my choices. These are my values. And so when I see the things that I value being treated in this way, being offended is part of the package deal. Okay, so I'm offended. Well, what? Am I interested in abandoning my values? No. Okay, then be offended. Okay, I will be, It's just a sign that that I have values that are not shared. And, when it comes to working though and living in the world where I'm dealing with, I have to realize that other people have their values, and maybe I have to negotiate their perspective. Maybe I need to negotiate their focus. Maybe I need to bring other things to their awareness that they're not paying attention to. And maybe I can be successful at it, or maybe not. Maybe they'll bring things to my awareness and I'll come to see things differently. But in the meantime, it's perfectly okay that I'm offended, and perfectly okay that they're not offended. I don't see it as I don't just don't see it as a problem. It's not an issue. And consequently, there's nothing I need to do about it. If I'm offended, I'll be offended and I'll enjoy it. It's a confirmation that I'm offended, that I have values. The other thing that I found about this, when I began to lean into my emotions, to embrace all of them for what they are, I discovered something that I wasn't quite anticipating. I discovered something. All of my emotions are really founded in a basic attitude of recognizing the real value of being human. Does something hurt you? Do you feel hurt about it? Ultimately, it's because there's something of value that is pained. For example, what if you find yourself being um, put down, being made fun of, and you feel maybe ashamed, or you feel other feelings going on inside of you? I really believe that at a deeper level, there's something inside of you that says, "Wait a minute, I am a valuable human being. I am precious." And somehow this preciousness is getting lost, or maybe you're actually feeling like it's been lost, and that you're no longer really precious. Well, that hurts. That's depressing. There's a sense in which all of our emotions are at their root a way of saying, wait a minute, being who I am is a valuable thing to be. Even if I don't know exactly who I am or understand it all, the bottom line of all these emotions is actually a self affirming sense of value. And when you realize in empathy that you're not the only person around here with feelings, you begin to realize that it's It's really only because we have not yet maturely learned to manage the negotiation of the fact that our focus isn't held in common, our perspective isn't held in common, and therefore our feelings will be different from each other. But the truth is, all people, when they perceive something they think is unjust, feel anger. All people who feel violated feel angry. All people who feel that something is happening in a way that's going to work out well feel happy. Now, what they perceive to be that is working out well, what they perceive to be a violation will be different things. This means that it's also important to recognize that if somebody has certain feelings that don't make sense to you, that you can't talk them out of those feelings. What you have to do is you have to accept their feelings for what they are, and you have to then talk to them till you can come to a point where you can at least appreciate and understand what has grabbed their focus. What is it that their perspective is about those things? What is it that they really have the ability to see? And what is it that their experience gives to them in terms of an asset and a resource in understanding things? Well, once you understand those things, you might be able to help them shift their focus, shift their awareness, consider other possibilities, become aware of things they weren't aware of. And if you're able to successfully do that, you will find that they start feeling very differently without your ever having to deal with those things. Now, let's be honest. Many people deal with their emotions in a way that is not proper, not appropriate. When we're angry, if we vent this on other people, that's not appropriate. After all, I mean, like I had mentioned before, we tend to be angry, for example, when we perceive something unjust is happening, when we perceive some violation of something or someone or ourselves that we value. There's this responsive anger. Well, let me ask you this. Is that which you see violated truly valuable? If it's truly valuable, then be angry. Well, what should you do with that anger? Feel it. There's nothing to do with it. You don't need to do anything with it. It's not a problem. The way you feel is never a problem. Well, sure, we'd all like to feel better. I'd like to have $1 million in the bank. But you got to come across the money and put it in your account before you can have it like that. And sorry, life is what it is. And if you're going to have these values and these are going to be the experiences, then these are going to be the feelings that you're going to have. And that's okay. I think of Viktor Frankl, who in prison, he's in a concentration camp and he's finding value and meaning in life, even though his circumstances and situation are miserable. Think of the Apostle Paul, who's credited with saying, I have learned that no matter what state I'm in, therein to be content. And I got to tell you, I'm finding myself very much in that same kind of a thing. I just refuse to see the way that I feel as being any problem. I see it as a reflection of my conclusions and of my focus, and it helps me to be honest with what they are. And that's all that they do. And that's all I need them for. And they are not a problem. Now, they're not always pleasant, but this is not a life where I get to, push other people around or shove other people around or make them do things that make me a happy, well-adjusted person in the way that I want to define it. That's not the point. It's a way of giving to us a sense of honesty. I would want to argue that many times our focus is not an honest one, not a balanced one. I would want to argue that many times our perspective is not an honest one or a well-developed one or one that is that it works on multiple axes where we're willing to consider things in a variety of ways that they can be understood and appreciated. I would want to argue that we're not always in the best of health. And sometimes we're ill, sometimes we're just not in good condition. And I would want to argue that we all come with different capacities for understand. Some have an IQ of 160, some people have an IQ of 75. There's nothing right or wrong about any of that. So although there are all these other issues that when it comes to a focus and a perspective, things that involve responsibility, There can be real serious problems. But I'm going to argue that with all of those things being as they are, the way you feel, it's the way you feel. It's a natural result of all those other things. There's a sense in which it is the end product of a process. And if there's anything wrong with that end product, it's not because it's because there's something wrong with the process. You know, if you're breaking out in hives because you're allergic to food you shouldn't be eating, then maybe you shouldn't be eating that food. It's not just saying, well, do something about these hives. I got other. Yep, it's all about acceptance, being present for the person. Um, I like that. The comment may have come. I'm not sure what it related to, but I like that. The truth is accepting the way you feel as just the reflection. This is the way it is. These are the terms of life. I'm sorry, you can't make this decision to jump off a 50-foot cliff over jagged rocks below and decide, when I hit bottom, I don't think I'm going to have my body damaged. I think this time, I'm just going to land perfectly fine. I'm sorry. The constraints of reality being what they are, if you're going to jump over that cliff, if you're going to make the decision to jump over the cliff, and you live in a physical human body, and it's 50 feet down, and there's jagged rocks down there, the outcome of that is inevitable. This isn't something you can choose. If you're going to have the focus you have, and you think that focus is a proper one, if you're going to have the perspective that you have, and you think that perspective is a proper one, if you're going to be in the condition of health that you're in, and that's the best you can do, and if this is what your abilities and capacities and skills and talents are as a human being, and that's the best you can do, then hey, the outcome of that and the way you feel is going to be the way you're going to feel. And that's just a reflection of those things. If you want any of that to change, you're going to have to change your focus. You're going to have to change your perspective. You have to change your state of health. You're going to have to somehow take a smart pill or a dumb pill, or, like, or as Lisa's grandfather used to say that I don't have one here. I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy. But you know, when it comes down to it, is this: I want us to take responsibility to own our feelings as the way we feel. That not to say that there's never going to be an issue or problem, but wherever there's an issue or a problem, it comes from the fact that we are not taking responsibility for our focus and our perspective. That's usually the biggest problem. Or we're not accepting the genuine and honest challenges that are involved in dealing with somebody else who has a different focus and a different perspective. And we're not willing to engage them in a way that honestly deals with those issues. Instead, we'd rather manipulate. We'd rather shame. We'd rather try to make people feel that they should do certain things. We'd rather kind of get them engaged in some sort of excitement. But this is all a form of actually creating people who are not really free to be themselves. Not free, not respected, not really accepted or understood as people who are valuable. And it also tells me this, that we may not have thought of it this way, but when we can't embrace our feelings and accept them completely for what they are and find that to be no problem, when we can't accept the feelings of other people as being the natural result of their process of focus, perspective, health, and capacities, then there's a sense in which we're saying, I really don't believe in human beings. I really don't think they're that valuable. I really don't think they have the ability to do it. Now, I can understand that when we misunderstand these things, we therefore begin approaching them inappropriately and incorrectly, and no wonder it doesn't work. But anyhow, that's basically the way that I've come to understand the process and the dynamic of human emotions. And it's a result of a great deal of study that I've done and reading a lot of the research that's taken place over the last 20 years. And it has exploded, the amount of research being done in the area of human emotion. And, I'd encourage you to embrace yourself, love others, and take all of these things in a step at a time. Now we have like just about a minute left. So if there's any other comments, Joey, that you want to pass on to me, I'm going to have to wrap up in about a minute, but I've pretty much expressed myself. So let me just in summary put it this way. I believe that all of our emotions are a response to what we are doing with reality. Our emotions are never a response to the external world. Based on what we're focusing on, or not focusing on, based on what our perspective is or what our perspective is not, based on what our state of health is or what our state of health is not, based on our capacity, our aptitudes, our ability to comprehend. These are the things that determine exactly what you will feel. It's only by managing these things that we can manage the end result. And that end result should be something free to be what it is. And as a result, free to be what it is should be embraced for what it is as a non problem. That way, what we do ends up becoming a result of what we find wise to do rather than what we feel like doing. And I found that the more I adopted this attitude, the more I was able to, with comfort, make this divide between how I feel and what I do. It made me, start doing things based on what seemed to be wise, uh, and to feel what I feel as a result of what my focus and perspective was, and that these were, to me, two separate issues, and they're good to bring them together if I can, but to recognize them as two separate issues. Anyhow, there we go. It looks like our time is out. I hope that this was something useful to you, and as a result of some of the kind of almost peripheral comments that I made in my last show. And we'll see you on Wednesday. Take care. This is Bob Graves, the Unconventional Pastor. See you then.